I'd like to talk to you today about California, and I'd like to talk to you about California because California is leading the nation as it always does. Now it's leading the nation off the cliff. And we all live in California, and we see what happens in California, and California is the biggest, boldest, highest contrast example of what is going wrong with the country. And since we all live here, and since we all see it, if we can understand California, we can understand what's happening to the rest of the country. The short form is that we're going through a cycle that happens throughout history, has happened innumerable times, hundreds of times throughout history. And I can go on and on about this, but the simplest way to think about this is the best thing I ever heard about it, so just listen for 1 second. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make bad times. Bad times make strong men. We are in the strong men make good times. That was the California that we grew up in. Good times make weak men is where we are now. And we are turning into the cusp of weak men making bad times. That's upon us very quickly too. It's a cycle and it goes on and on and on. So when we talk about the problem with California, we can't talk about Jerry Brown. We have to talk about Jerry Brown's father. Actually, not his father. We have to talk about his grandfather. So here's what's important to understand about this. We look at California, we look at what they're doing to California, and everybody in this room looks at what happens. We look at the quality of the roads, we look at the taxation, we look at the California syndrome, which is basically this. Taxes are high in California, businesses are leaving California. That means there's not enough revenue for California, therefore we have to raise the taxes in California. This is the California model. And we look at this and we say, the state's dying, it's in a death spiral, you know it, we know it, what is the matter with them? We keep saying, what's the matter with them? What's wrong with them? Don't they understand it? Can't they see it? Can't they see it? And the thing that I'm here to teach you about today is something very simple. If you want to know why they can't see it in Sacramento, it's the wrong question. Of course they see it. Of course they see it. They just don't care. And the reason they don't care is what I want to talk about today, because if you can't understand the dynamics of the California experience, you will never understand why this country is in the trouble it's in. So I said, great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers, let's go way, 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 way back. Oh, I don't know, even before 1964, let's go back 2 billion years. It's a good start. So somewhere around 2 billion years ago, cells were dividing, and then somehow, by accident, cells got together in such a way that if you had two different cells, if you had a male cell and a female cell, you could accelerate change because when you have sexual diversity, something interesting happens. When you have two sexes, instead of it just being random chances, now the one sex can say, that is a very, very buff-looking dude. And the other sex can say, she rocks. And so the strongest males and the most reproductive sexually females get together and everything goes much faster. Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about the invention of sexuality? Because once you have two sexes, something enters the equation that was never there before, and what enters the equation is the idea of domination. Domination is important, and we think we're immune to it, but we're not. Domination is the idea that somebody is more fit than somebody else. Somebody is more able to reproduce than somebody else. Somebody deserves to be more reproducing than somebody else. Domination is all of human history, all of it, up until very, very recently. Domination. And since this has been the pattern, we have lived as a society that has been governed by domination. Prior to the United States of America, you were either the dominator or you were the dominatee, and that was it. You were either the peasant who came before the czar and brought your little miserable basket of shriveled potatoes so that you could live another year under his military rule and back yourself out of the room and then go back to your little farm, which he owned, and which he could do anything he wanted to. He owned you. That kind of domination is not unusual. So we look at situations like this, we look at domination societies and we think of kings and earls and all this stuff. We think, what's wrong with those people? No, there's nothing wrong with those people. That's how human beings have always been. We're the freaks. We're the freaks. This is a very important point to understand. Domination, ruling people, telling other people what to do, the burning, insatiable desire to tell other people what to do is common to all of humanity through all of time, and the only people that don't have this gene are the freaks that are in this room right now, who are descended from the freaks that found an open planet 200, 300, 400 years ago. There simply was suddenly a new world. A new world, not a new country, a new world. So what happened? Well, if you look back at human history, what you find is, for the first time ever, all of these people who've been dominated by kings and dukes and earls and all the rest of it, suddenly there's a place where nobody is. There is no domination there. There's no domination there because there's no people there. And the short form is that a few people decided, you know what, now's our chance. If we leave here and get away from this domination, we can be free of domination if we go over there. And being free of domination is what makes America the miracle that it is. And if you look at Western Hemisphere, you notice something. Western Hemisphere consists of North and South America. There are two countries in the entire hemisphere that work. One of them is Canada, and the other one's the United States. And then there's a line where there should be a wall but isn't. And south of that, every other country doesn't work. On one level or another, they don't work. Mexico doesn't work. Brazil comes in, sometimes it works, then it doesn't. Argentina collapses. All of these South American countries don't work. And the reason that they don't work and that the European countries like descended from America and Canada do work is very simple. Above that line, which runs across the southern border of the United States, north of that line, Canada and the United States were primarily settled by English-speaking Protestants, and south of the line, it was settled primarily by Spanish-speaking Catholics. And here's what's the important difference. When the Spanish came to the New World not to stay. All of the conquistadors did not come to South America to stay in South America. The conquistadors came to South America to get all the gold they could get their hands on and then go back to Cordoba and live in these incredible mansions where they could lord it over the rest of their European people. He could dominate their people back there. But the North American settlers said, no, we're not here to take the stuff. We're here to leave. We're running from those people. We're going to go over here and we're going to stay. This is a place where there isn't anybody. There's no law. There's no dukes. There's nothing. And the people who had the guts to take a chance got on boats. They left their entire families. They left them forever. It might as well have died, because when you got on a boat in 1600 or 1700 and came to America, you don't get to Skype your family back home at the end of the day. You say goodbye to them probably forever. You leave your village, you leave your family, you leave everything you own, you leave everything you've ever known, everything that's familiar to you, everything that's comfortable to you. You leave it behind and you get on a boat with your wife and your kids and sail off to something that you know nothing about. Now that kind of an act requires courage. And it requires the ability to take a risk. And the kind of people that take that kind of risk are a very small percentage of the population. And the people who are willing to take that kind of a risk are the people who are not willing to be told what to do all of the time. And so we ended up with this country that was a home to people who had self-selected, which is why my grandfather came here in 1915 from England. And my grandfather, who arrived here as an immigrant from England, has a lot more in common with somebody's grandfather who came here from Mexico, and somebody's grandfather who came here from China, and somebody's grandfather who came here from Brazil, than he does with other Englishmen. The fact that he came here and is standing next to other first-generation immigrants means that these two people have more in common with each other than they do with the people that they left back home. And what they have in common is an unwillingness to be dominated. That's why they took the risk. So far, so good. Okay, so far, so good. So we set up this country and we build a country, and built into this country is the idea that you will not dominate us. Great. And we built a government that was designed to protect us from domination by the government. Great. And we had revolutionary ideas that were really revolutionary, never been tried anywhere else in the world. Most important of which is this idea of natural law. This country is the only country in the history of the planet that was ever founded on the idea of natural law. Natural law is the idea that there are laws above the laws of men, and that if you make a law that contradicts natural law, too bad for you. Natural law is the law of God. Natural law is the law of universal values. So many people think, for an example, that the Constitution grants us the right to free speech. No. No, 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 no. No, it does not. It absolutely does not. The Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to carry firearms. And if you think that's the case, you need to go back and do a little reading. The First Amendment does not grant you the right to free speech. The First Amendment says that your right to free speech is given to you at birth when you enter this world, and the government can't take it away from you. The right to defend yourself is something that you are born with. You are born, every single being on this earth, every single organism has a right to defend itself. Except for human beings, of course, if you ask the left. Sponges can defend themselves. Bacteria can defend themselves. Cockroaches can defend themselves, but people, no. That's what they actually believe. But that's dominance, and we'll come back to that in a second. So now we've got this country and everything's just humming along. And because everybody in this country refuses to be dominated, and because the government was set up in such a way, for the first time in human history, the unlocked potential of the common person, the regular person, suddenly becomes possible. Suddenly it becomes possible for a guy like Andrew Carnegie to come from Scotland with $20 in his pocket, get a job working at a railroad, make a tough decision. Carnegie's story is really interesting. He was working as a railroad. He came with $20 by himself. He was 15 or something. He had a job on a railroad. There was a crisis. Somebody had to make a decision. Nobody would make a decision. Carnegie, at 18 or 19, said, no, go ahead, wrote it through this way and so on. Turns out he was right. Next thing you know, there's Carnegie Hall. He's the richest man in America because he was a risk taker, because he was courageous and he believed in himself, and so on and so on and so on. So we understand the history of our country. We're getting to the whole California mess right now. When you leave hundreds of millions of people alone and you don't dominate them and you let them do what they want to do and you treat them like actual individual people, the amount of wealth that they will generate becomes absolutely astronomical. Dinesh D'Souza, who I've gotten to know very well, wrote to me in an interview I did with him. He said, if you're a criminal, if you're really a serious criminal, and you want to steal the most valuable thing in the world, what is it? What's the most valuable thing in the world? Dollar value. No, it's not freedom. It's not freedom, it's not liberty. I'm talking about something that can actually be taken. I'm talking about something with a price tag on it. You know what it is? Turns out that the most valuable thing in the world is the private property held by the citizens of the United States of America. $72 trillion. $72,000 billion is what we all together own and have made through our hard work and the hard work of our ancestors. $72 trillion is what all of that out there costs. And if you're going to steal something, why think small, right? If you're going to steal something, you might as well go for the biggest thing there is, which is $72 trillion of private property held in the hands of the American people. And now's where it gets interesting. We think that we understand the people that we're dealing with. We think when we say things like, don't they understand that the roads are terrible? We think when we say things like, don't they see that businesses are leaving? We think that we understand them. We don't understand them. It's not capable of us to really understand them. We don't understand them because they're not like us. They are so different from us psychologically that they might as well be a different species. And sorry to go out into the weeds again, but I need to digress because it's important that you understand this. I was talking about dominance before. I was talking about how the powerful and the strong are wired to get their way over the weak and the alone. That's what the whole thing is about throughout all of nature, and we're part of nature too. Here's a little interesting story. One of the many, many species of animals on this planet that deals with dominance is the cuttlefish. Do you know what the cuttlefish looks like? It's kind of like a small squid with a shell on its back. Well, the cuttlefish has developed, at great expense, by the way, this incredible system of colors. It can change colors like an octopus, but much, much faster. They can send all these signals and all the rest of this stuff. So when cuttlefish are mating for dominance to determine which ones are going to be able to succeed and breed in life, when the dominance comes down to it, what happens is this. The cuttlefish get together. The females are on the bottom of the ocean, and the male cuttlefish hover in a cloud over the females, and they try to make themselves as big as possible to dominate and intimidate the rest of them. And finally, the biggest, strongest males get to go down and have the party. But the very weak male cuttlefish, the small ones, have developed a strategy. And what the weak, small male cuttlefish do is, instead of trying to make themselves much, much bigger, they make themselves much, much smaller. And they look exactly like females. And they fall right through these males that are having this fight up here, and they just go right down to the bottom where the rest of the females are, and nobody pays any attention to them, and off they go. They don't play the game. They don't play the game. They have nothing but disdain for the game. And when I say the game, I mean everything that we hold dear. Now, I bet you I could ask every single person in this room the same question, and I can guarantee you that everybody in this room would answer the same way, because we're built a certain way. Would you rather lose fairly or win by cheating, assuming you never got caught? Everybody here would rather lose fairly than win by cheating. You know why? It's because you're winners. That's why. It's because you're winners. You're capable of winning. You don't have to cheat to win. When you're capable of winning, you don't have to cheat to win. When you're capable of winning, losing is a lesson. That means you'll win more in the future. When you're capable of winning, you're not afraid to lose. In fact, when you're capable of winning and you really understand this, losing is something that's very good for you. It teaches you the mistakes that you made so you won't make them next time. But if you're not ever capable of winning, then all of those rules are meaningless. And what the cuttlefish discovered, and what the cuttlefish up in Sacramento have discovered, is that the rules that the winners play by binds them. It binds them to certain behaviors. And if they are willing to circumvent those restraints, they can do whatever they want to. You look at that little cuttlefish up there, that little male who makes himself look like a female so he can sneak past the other males and get down to where the females are, and it's low, and it's cowardly, and it's disgusting, and it's cheating. And it works if you're not capable of competing. And so that's why they do it. Now we're starting to understand a little bit of the people that we have in charge of our lives in Washington. I want to give you one more quick little example, because it is all ultimately about biology. I'm trying to explain to you, really, with all this biological talk, I'm trying to explain to you that the people that we're running against, the people that are ruining this state and trying to ruin the country, are biologically different than we are psychologically. They're wired completely differently. So let me give you one more little quick example. There are two different kinds of species strategies in the world, and we'll take a good example of both of them. One of the strategies of a species is the rabbit. Okay? The rabbit. The rabbit's strategy is make as many rabbits as possible. That's what rabbits do. They make as many rabbits as possible. There aren't any stronger rabbits than others. You never see rabbits butting their heads against each other to determine who's top rabbit. They don't do it because it's a waste of time for rabbits. Rabbits succeed where there is an infinite field of clover. In other words, there is so much food to eat that by trying to make a better rabbit, you're actually wasting time. You don't need to make a better rabbit. There's no competition. Just make more rabbits. So that's called the R strategy. On the other side, let's take a species like the wolf. Now, the wolf is not living in a world of infinite clover. Wolves live in the woods, in the mountains, where there's very little to eat. Wolves can't just have as many wolf pups as they want to, because they'll just plain die. The wolf has to do something different. The wolf has to say to itself, we have to make the very best possible offspring we can, because there's so little food. We need the wolves to be top quality individuals. That's why the males have all these mating rituals to determine who's dominant and all the rest. So rabbits, with an infinite food supply, they don't care about other rabbits. They don't have any rules. They don't have any hierarchies. They don't have any sense of honor. They don't have any sense of clan. There's no such thing as a rabbit clan. There's no rabbit tribe. There's no rabbit pack. No. They don't see enemies. If more rabbits come into the field, they don't go, oh, whoa, that's bad, because they're rabbits. There's an endless supply of food, and having other rabbits here, no problem. I'll just hop over here, and we'll just keep on eating. But wolves know that if another pack of wolves come into their territory, it's either going to be us or them. because there's not enough food to feed everybody. It's going to be us or them, therefore we have to compete. So basically, here's what I'm trying to say to you folks. If you look at how wolves behave, their actual behavior, what you find is this. Wolves have dangerous competitions with each other where they try to determine who's the fittest. But when a wolf is in a fight and another wolf gives up, it shows its throat, and that deactivates the wolf. It just simply stops. Once the wolf is determined that it's dominant over this other wolf, the fight stops. It's over. It stops. Done. It's disarmed. Rabbits don't do that. Wolves have loyalty. Wolves work in a pack. Wolves work with each other. Wolves take great care of their children and endure with them for years and years and years, teaching them how to be good wolves. This is what we do. And this policy, a nation of wolves, creates so much wealth that eventually Wolfland is so filled with money that it starts to look like an endless field of clover. And when that happens, all of a sudden the reason for being a wolf goes away, and the strategy of being the rabbit becomes a smarter play. So when you think about what's happening to California, understand that there are rabbits out there without any sense of honor. They don't understand what the word means. They have a vague conception of it as something that limits us, something that holds them back. But they don't understand it. And when you say to them, don't you realize that you are ruining the future? They will look at you as if you're from Mars. They don't care. They want to eat, and they want to eat now. And when you say to these people, your public sector unions are destroying this economy, they will say to you, when they're honest, yes, but I'm making $180,000 and I'm retiring at 50 and I'm making $180,000 a year. But you're going to ruin the state. I don't care. I don't care. You're killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. I don't care. I got my golden eggs. I don't care. And this is the thing that we cannot get our heads around. We cannot understand them because we don't think like them, because we have an entirely different view of how everything works. Which is why, for example, the liberals, the rabbit people, have an attitude about guns. They're always talking about gun control. They're never talking about crime control. Why? Well, if you are not mentally or physically willing to defend your life, right? If you don't have the guts, the courage, the training, the strength, whatever, to be willing to defend your life, if you don't have that, then it's important that nobody else has that either. Because if they can defend themselves, and I can't, then I'm going to be preyed on, and they're not. If I don't have the courage and the guts to defend my own life with a gun, then it's in my interest to make sure that nobody is able to defend themselves with a gun, because that way the predators will attack everybody equally, and I've got a better chance to survive. If, on the other hand, some of these rabbits can shoot back, and I can't, then all of a sudden I'm in worse trouble, which is why the left, who believes in the abolishment of guns, hates law enforcement, hates the military, and yet is more dependent on the military and law enforcement than any conservative is, because we're armed to the teeth and we can take care of ourselves. All of this stuff starts to make sense when you put it into these kind of biological explanations. And it's a hard thing to really get your mind around, but it really does start to make sense. So for example, right now, in San Francisco, California, you can get an app for your phone, and there's an app right now that you can get that will allow you to navigate the streets of San Francisco and carefully point out using GPS where the largest piles of human excrement are. I'm not making this up. Very recently, San Francisco passed a law that said that just basically going to the toilet, lowering your pants, and defecating on the streets is not against the law in San Francisco. Owning a goldfish is against the law in San Francisco, but defecating on the streets is not against the law in San Francisco. San Francisco has decided to fine a restaurant $1,000 for every single plastic straw that they hand out, but the city of San Francisco hands out plastic needles to addicts without any questions asked, and the needles and the human excrement form little pockets on the streets of San Francisco that you now can get an app so that you don't have to walk completely through. And the mayor of San Francisco wants to be the governor of California. So what does this mean? What does this mean? How does Gavin Newsom think? San Francisco is not Detroit. Okay? San Francisco is not a poor city. San Francisco is not a Rust Belt city. San Francisco's problems with human feces on the street are not a result of San Francisco being stone cold broke. It's the richest city in America. It used to be the most beautiful city in America. Maybe the most beautiful city in the world. So how does a guy like Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Brown, all these people, how do they deal with the fact that they are willing and able to let people basically just take a dump on the streets of San Francisco? How do they live with themselves? They live with themselves because they don't have to walk on the sidewalks of San Francisco. And you would say to yourself, well, what about the people that do have to walk among all this human excrement? And now we're down to it. They don't care. They don't care. Barbara Boxer and Feinstein, Debbie Feinstein especially. Senator Feinstein, Barbara Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein. I lose track. They all just become a blur of red-eyed rabbits with long teeth. And my wife will tell you about the screaming I do at night during the rabbits, they're everywhere. But think about this. Why is it that Dianne Feinstein can call for the complete disarmament of every single member of the state of California, every single citizen, while standing behind her are armed guards? People like us look at this and we say, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. This is why I'm trying to tell you they're not like us. It does make sense. Because Dianne Feinstein's life is worth protecting and yours isn't. Do we all understand that? Is that clear enough? Her life is worth protecting because she's a member of the ruling class. And whatever is necessary to protect the lives of Dianne Feinstein and Jerry Brown and all the rest of them, Gavin Newsom, well, that's it. Folks, gun control is a perk for progressives. It's a perk. We want to disarm all of you because if we can disarm all of you, then the only people who have armed bodyguards are us. Kind of like the old Duke and the Earl and the King and everybody else who had all of the power in their hands to dominate other people. These people have been with us since the dawn of time, and America has been a little oasis of free people who didn't tell other people what to do, and when you leave them alone for a quarter of a century, they create $72 trillion worth of wealth until suddenly there is so much wealth that rabbit mentality takes over, and then it's just a question of how much can you eat before you die. You don't care about the future. Rabbits don't plan ahead. Wolves plan ahead. Rabbits don't. And that's where we are. And so why do we pay the taxes that we pay in California? Anybody got a quick answer for why we pay the taxes that we pay? There's an easy answer for it. We pay what? 9% income tax, 10, 11, 12% sales tax. Why do we pay that? We pay it because we can afford it. We pay it because we can afford it. We live in California because we can afford to live in California. The house that my wife and I rent is about $1,200,000. For $1,200,000, I could buy a palace in any other state except for California, with a few other blue state exceptions. We live here because we can afford it. We put up with it because we can afford it. We deal with all of the intrusions on our lives. We deal with all of the control. We deal with a $1,000 fine for throwing a frisbee on the beach. We deal with all of it because we can afford it. And once you understand this, you understand why we're not fighting them back. That self-defense mechanism that we have has not been activated yet. This is the old saw about turning up the water on the frog so that it gets warmer and warmer, and finally next thing, it never gets hot enough for it to jump out. We put up with it because we can afford it. If we were serious, we would take our AR-15s and get in the street and start firing a couple rounds over some people's heads in Sacramento, and the taxes would go down very, very quickly. But we won't do that because we know what the consequences would be, and we can afford what we're going through now. And finally, when things get bad enough, we just leave the state. So we leave the state. The Golden State, which created so much agriculture, aerospace, entertainment, gone. Aerospace, gone. Agriculture, no. They're blowing up dams and they're not letting any water into the valleys up there because of the Delta smelt, which is a sardine. And if it was delicious, we'd have 100 billion of them because we'd have enormous farms of people growing Delta smelts. But they're using that as an excuse to stop agriculture. And the reason they're stopping agriculture is because farmers are independent people who need to keep what they earn, and they vote Republican. So they must be forced out of the state. And the only people we're going to let into California are people who don't have any education, can't speak the language, and who are dependent on government the second they arrive because they will vote Democrat. If we were talking about illegally bringing in, I don't know, 250,000 Russian PhDs a week through the border, all of a sudden the Democrats would be screaming for a wall real fast because those people would vote Republican, and that's not what they want. So when you understand this, you begin to get the idea. The people that are running our lives in Sacramento now, and this is the whole story right here, would rather rule over the ruins than share rulership and governance over the successful. They don't care because it doesn't matter if California is ruined. It doesn't matter if California is ruined. It doesn't matter if 100,000 immigrants come in every single second. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be living in Gavin Newsom's house. That's why it doesn't matter. That's why it doesn't matter. If I was running the campaign for John Cox, here's what I'd do. I'd hire a couple of actors who looked exactly like immigrant Mexican workers. I'd have a van across the street, and I'd have a hidden camera, and I would let these two men just basically take a walk and put a foot onto Gavin Newsom's property. And I would start a stopwatch, and I would find out how long it would take for the private police force that he maintains around his compound to arrive and escort these gentlemen off of the property from the man who says that there should be no borders, no walls, no locked doors, no nothing. Once you understand this, you begin to understand the trouble we're in. And we can't understand it because we have honor and we have integrity and we have a sense of the future and we have a sense of decency and concern for one another that these individuals do not possess. You can argue with them till they're blue in the face about how they're destroying everything, and they know, but they don't care. And so you have to fight these people as ruthlessly as they need to be fought with. You have to fight with them ruthlessly, which is why Donald Trump is president. He's the only person I saw in my entire career who actually fought back the way that they fight. It is. 2012, Mitt Romney may have had whatever you think about him personally as a politician, in terms of his personal character, he may have been the best man since George Washington run for office. But no, he's a racist, and he's a misogynist, and he puts his dog on the roof of the car and all the rest of this stuff. So if you don't want a gentleman who's a businessman, who's erudite and polite, well-spoken, intelligent, if you're going to turn that guy into a Nazi, then what you're going to get next time is a guy who is not that well-spoken, not that kind, not that civilized, but will not allow himself to be turned into a Nazi because he's one of them. He came from them. I'm not saying he's one of them now, but he knows how they work. That's why he's successful. He's successful because he's been in show business and he knows what he's dealing with. Donald Trump knows what he's dealing with, and we don't. And we'd better real quick. So from now on, the way we have to fight these people is we have to fight them in terms that they understand. The final thing I'd like to say about this is this. They're successful because, like all of these cheating cuttlefish, they understand the rules that we all play by. They understand that we would rather lose fairly than win by cheating, which to them is like alchemy of something. It's unimaginable. It's just simply unimaginable to them. If you tell them you could get away with this, you can have this job, you can have this money, and no one's ever going to find out. But it'll be against the law. But no one will ever find out. Sign me up. They don't have it. And again, they're normal human beings. We're the freaks here with this strange genetic displacement called honor and respectability and hard work and all the rest of it. So we need to fight them on a level that they understand. And if I was running the government, the campaign for John Cox, I would be talking about human excrement on the streets of San Francisco, and I would never, ever, ever talk about anything else ever, ever, ever. That's all I would talk about. That's all I would talk about. I would say, Mr. Newsom, you are the governor of San Francisco. You have taken the richest, most beautiful city in America and made it into a place where you have to have an iPhone so that you can avoid the drug needles and the human excrement on the streets of your city. And you want to do that to the rest of us? Want to explain to us how that's going to work? I'm very curious to know why you think you deserve to govern this state when this is what you've done to the most rich, beautiful city in America. I want to know about the human excrement on the streets. Period. well, I've got a plan for this, and we've got this, and we're going to... No. No, the plans and all the rest of the stuff are the same thing you said when you got into San Francisco. I want to talk about why it is, sir, that you, as a mayor, have set up the richest city in America so that you have to have an iPhone app to walk around the human waste that is in the streets of San Francisco. I want to know why you think that qualifies you to run the rest of the state. And the reason that you don't mind this is because you don't have to walk through it. And the reason that you say we should have open borders in a sanctuary state is because your house is protected and defended by a very elaborate security system backed up by a private police force. And the reason you want to disarm the population is because you've got security guards who are armed to teeth right behind you. You are no better than any baron or lord or king or duke or any other degenerate loser who has tried to provide dominance over us, and we're just too good and too decent and too prosperous to stop you. Well, those days are over. We're done with you. We've had enough of all of you. We've had enough of your insanity with plastic straws. We've had enough with the idea that I can't throw a Frisbee on the beach without getting a $1,000 fine. I'm tired of people having to pay $400 to ride in a carpool lane someplace down in Orange County, $400 a month or something to ride in the private lanes. Do you know why they passed that law? Because the people that passed the law can afford to pay it or they're carved out. Once you understand this, it's very simple. Obamacare 2. Let's have this as the greatest thing in the world. We don't want to be any part of it ourselves. We're going to exempt ourselves from it and all our friends, but it's wonderful. So the question is, at what point do we just finally say, no, we've had enough? You know, it doesn't mean that we have to get the rifles, not yet anyway. But of all the things that give me comfort in this world, it's the fact knowing that we're the ones with the guns, not these murderous, tyrannical despots who have nothing better to do with their lives but tell other people what to do. The fact that we're armed and they're not is the reason why we're here out here right now having this conversation instead of having this conversation behind barbed wire someplace in Alaska. Okay? So we better decide pretty quick about what it's going to take for us to understand the nature of what these people are and start fighting them the way that they need to be fought, which is why I've said from the beginning that Sabo is the most important piece on the board because this guy understands the art that Sabo does hits them where they live. He hits them where they live. He calls them out. He calls them out and he simply says, he doesn't mess around. He doesn't mess around. He doesn't say Hillary Clinton's tax rates are too high. He says, you know, he puts the flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz there and says, vote Hillary for 2016. It's all you need to know. You're the guy with the verb Mohammed, right, on a T-shirt? You had that one? Yeah. Okay, so he basically wore a T-shirt that had a verb and then Mohammed below it. And that's courage. And that's clarity. It's clarity. It's understanding what you're dealing with. So this is what we have to do, and we better understand that we better do it now, and it's going to be young guys like this gentleman over here and Sabo and all the rest of us, but if you do not understand the nature of what you're fighting, you will never beat them, and I will close with one very last story because this is what keeps me going sometimes. When we talk about this and we start talking about fighting them on their level, people say, well, gee, Bill, that means we're going down to their level and we lose just by descending to their level. In World War II, the first time that the U.S. Marines first came into contact with the Japanese in any serious capacity was in Guadalcanal in 1942. And as honorable, decent people who are descended from a long line of wolves and free people, when they went to World War II to fight the Japanese, they fought them as they were an honorable enemy. So, on Guadalcanal, let me tell you what happened. We captured the island of Guadalcanal, we captured the airfield. The Japanese abandoned the fight, withdrew, and left their troops scattered on these very small islands, like not much larger than Eden here, around Guadalcanal. And these Japanese troops were out there starving to death. And one day, after about 3 or 4 weeks after the Japanese Navy had left, a group of these Japanese on this island, they could see them very clearly from the mainland, came out and they started waving this white flag. So this young Marine lieutenant said, well, sir, I'll go over there, we'll get their surrender, we'll get those guys off that island, get them into a prisoner of war camp, get them some food and some medicine. So this young Lieutenant Marine led a squad of guys over there. I don't know how many people, 12, 15, something like that, got in Higgins' boat, went over to the island. They're waving the white flag of surrender. The Marines come out. They walk towards the guy with the white flag. He drops the white flag. Behind him, they have 2 machine guns. They open up with machine guns, kill every single one of the Marines. And if they had a Marine globe and anchor on their arm, they hacked those off with a samurai sword and stacked them on the beach. And after that, the Marines didn't just simply walk over and accept the surrender of people waving a white flag. They didn't go and help people who were moaning in pain because more often than not, that Japanese soldier was holding a grenade that was going to kill the medic, the person with the medic, and maybe the soldier that's guarding the medic. After that, the Marines understood. They didn't have to have a lecture. They didn't have to have a survey. They didn't have to do anything. They understood, look, we came to fight them honorably, and they're not fighting honorably, so we either fight them on their level or we lose. And if we lose, then there'll be nothing but them around. Right? Can we do it? We can. We can go down and fight them on their level and not be dirtied by them because we have that genetic propensity for honor and decency and fair play that they don't have. So I'm ready to get down in the mud and whoop these scoundrels right out of their miserable muddy boots. And I hope you feel the same way. Thanks very much for joining us.